So what are we talking about today? We're talking about voltage regulators for your gauges. Most classic Fords have them. And after the break, we're going to talk about what you need to do to test them to make sure yours are okay. And we'll talk about why that can be a real issue.
For 45 years, the Miller family and the dedicated staff at Autocrafters have been here helping you to restore your dream Ford. Thank you for your support. Here's to another 45 years of delivering parts for your Falcon, Fairlane, F100, Galaxy, Maverick, and Pinto.
All right, so what I've got here on the table is a 1974-75 Torino gauge package and a 1973-74, what I would call the sport gauges. These were typically done in the competition package that they did for the Torinos. That's unimportant because basically this thing is just shot. It's unusable, but the gauge package is still pretty nice. What I wanted to find out on this is my voltage regulator on this one good? Because I know that the voltage regulator in our 75 Gran Torino is not. We're exhibiting a problem whereby when you drive the car for a little while, the gauges will start to peg out, which tells me that the voltage regulator on the back here is not regulating the voltage. Something is going on causing it to be erratic. And what I found out off camera was that we have the same problem with the voltage regulator on the stock gauges as well. Now most of the stuff on these original gauges, on the Torinos especially, was idiot lights. You didn't get full gauge setups until you got into the competition gauge package. What I'm going to do right now, though, is I'm going to talk to you about how I like to test these, because it is a little different than what we would normally do. A lot of times we like using multimeters around here to test things, but for me, for this kind of testing, honestly, something like our little test light that I've got right here is the Mac Daddy. That's what you want to use, because a test light is an incandescent bulb that is going to flash like you need to see. You'll need to see what kind of flash you're getting out of this, and sometimes with a meter, it's a little harder to be able to tell what it's actually doing. A test light will show you what you've got going on your voltage meter. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you this. When you get these, always check them, because the bulb may be fine, but you may have a corrosion issue on the little spring that they put inside of them. I got this one, I believe, at Harbor Freight years and years ago. I don't use it a lot, but for testing stuff like this, I absolutely want to have one. So get yourself a little test light like this. It's a really good idea. So what are we going to do? Now, on a voltage regulator, you've got power in here, and the power out to the gauges is this one on this side. You will also have blade types. I'm showing you that one now, and it will say a lot of times on them, if they're original, have the ING for ignition, which means you have 12 volts coming in, and this is reducing your voltage across it to go out to the gauges. Ford typically ran their gauges in a 6-volt variety. They didn't change their gauges much all the way from the 50s on up. When they went from a 6-volt to a 12-volt system, the gauges stayed basically 6-volt. So what I want to do is I want to put a ground lead. I'm going to show you this real quick. I want to put a ground lead from the negative side of a battery all the way to the ground point on the voltage regulator, and then a red lead or a positive lead to the positive side of the voltage regulator, which your 12 volts would be coming into. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ground out my test lead up here on the same ground line as my grounding there, and then I'm going to take this and put it on this post here. And you should be able to see a nice, consistent blinking from that bulb. That lets you know you have a voltage drop coming from here out to the gauges, and your gauges should be functioning normally. Now, if you don't get any kind of test light, that means the voltage regulator is completely dead, and you've got a real problem that way that you're going to have to just go ahead and replace it. What I'm going to show you next is still the same kind of problem, but the gauges will work, but they may not read accurately. Now you can test the voltage on that to see what your voltage is, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this one off of here, and I'm going to move this again over to the positive lead. And I'm going to take this and move it over to the ground leg for the voltage regulator. And then I'm going to take this and put it on this point. Now, you'll see how inconsistent that blink is. That is going to wreak havoc on your gauge reading. They won't read accurately because the pulses are wrong. Now, if it's reading a constant, you're probably going to peg your gauges all the way out because they're seeing almost completely 12 volts. As long as you don't do that for very long, your gauges are going to be okay. But if you do that for a long time, your gauges will start to malfunction and you may even have a gauge fire in the car. So I would recommend, if you're having a gauge problem where they're swinging all the way over to the high reading across the board, fuel gauge, a lot of times fuel gauge won't go all the way over to full, but you'll get where it reads higher than it should. Like on our Torino, it's reading at about 3/4 of a tank of gas when it's only really got 1/4 of a tank of gas. On our oil pressure gauge, it almost goes out and pegs all the way out to 80 psi, and on that engine I know we don't have 80 psi. Same thing for the temperature. The temperature will almost peg. Even our Explorer that we have on the property, the 94, is exhibiting some of those same problems, which means we may need to look at the voltage regulator on it. Now I think the 94s, they went to a slightly different system than these. Earlier ones than these actually had a contact point set that the heat would open and close the contact point on a regular basis to give you that reading. There are some of these IVRs that are coming out that are now electronic, and I don't find that they work as well, in my opinion, for power. In other words, they're doing what they're supposed to do, but for some reason, because it's not a sine wave like you have with a standard points type, you have a straight bar wave, I guess that's what it's called, and it's going on, off, instead of on, off, on, off. I know that sounds silly. I'm trying to tell you something. So that's what you have potentially with this, is an issue if you try to go to one of the later models. And there are some companies now that are making the ones like these that are the original, that have the points contacts inside of them. I might even be nice and tear this one apart since it's damaged already, so you can see what they look like on the inside, because I'm pretty sure this is not an electronic unit, although it may be by 1974. So I want to pull this one apart so you can take a look at it, and I'll have that done in just a second. Okay, now this is the IVR, or instrument voltage regulator, taken apart, and it's kind of hard to see possibly, but you can see that the wires have some charring on them, so something's happened to this thing in its storied past. There's no telling. But this can also be a problem of corrosion if you get water intrusion, like an instrument cluster sits outside, upside down, water gets inside of this area here and inside the cup and fills it up with water. Water coming in and out of there, if it sits outside for a long time, can cause these things to go bad. Now the nice thing is Autocrafters stocks voltage regulators for most applications that we would be dealing with here at the show. You know, Galaxy, Falcon, Fairlane, Torino, Gran Torino. This is the one they list for 71 to 72, possibly in the truck section, but it's exactly the same one that they would use in a 74, 75 Gran Torino on both the standard gauge package and on the competition gauge package. And I honestly can't remember whether that's really the name for it or not. That's what I've always called it, so that's what you're getting today. So that's it, folks. That's our little video for this week. I wanted to kind of show this to you so you can see what it's all about. If you're having a problem with your gauges wanting to peg out on you, or maybe not even working at all, it could be your instrument voltage regulator that's causing you an issue. Do me a favor, folks. Be kind to each other, love on each other, treat each other nice. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you on down the road. Looks like I'm going to be calling Autocrafters on Monday to get a voltage regulator for the gauge package in the Gran Torino. After I've gone to all the trouble to put everything back really nicely, it decides that it just doesn't want to play nice with others for now.